Hey guys! So in today's video, I am going to be making a mixed media piece of art where I am altering a chocolate box in order to create a journal cover. Now, I am not going to be binding this into a journal in this video. Instead, I am going to be making a step-by-step tutorial of that process in kind of a blog post form that I'm going to be posting over on my Patreon. The link for that will be in the description of this video, and that tutorial will actually be out tomorrow by the time this video goes public on YouTube. There is also already an exclusive video up on Patreon, so if you're looking for even more content from me, that might be a good way to do it. So with all that out of the way, let's focus on the actual piece that we're going to be doing today. Something that I do a lot of in my mixed media work is collect a lot of little bits and pieces that are basically trash. And I am very selective about the trash that I take, but if I know that I will use something one day, and I've actually gotten better about this, if I know that I will use it soon, then I will keep it. In this video, as I mentioned before, I am using a chocolate box that I had just finished, and I had actually opened it kind of weird. It was an accident the way that I opened it, but in doing so, I was able to look at it a little bit more objectively, and I could see that it would make a very interesting journal. I especially liked that there was a bit of a flap that could come over the main body of the journal, because that makes it very nice for different types of closures. Before I started this video, I did apply several layers of gesso to it. I wasn't super worried about making sure all of the background was whited out. I kind of liked the texture and look of some of that showing through anyways, especially because the surface was quite slick, and I knew that if I really wanted it to be pure white, I was probably going to have to sand it, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't really have a clear direction when I started working on this journal. I had a handful of paper scraps that I knew I kind of wanted to incorporate, and they were pretty neutral in appearance, mostly white, and I liked the way that they looked with the gesso. So I glued those down and just started working on top of it. I actually added even more gesso to the top of it to kind of blend those papers into the background even more, and I ended up drawing a face. This is pretty much what I tend to do with my journals anyways. If I don't know what else to do or what to use as a focal point, I will resort to drawing faces. I have drawn so many faces over the years that they are pretty relaxing for me, and I just enjoy the process of drawing them. With this particular one, I actually used a piece from one of the collage sheets that are available in my Etsy shop as the sort of base for the face. And this collage sheet is actually eyes that I cropped from other faces that I've painted in my journals over the years. So as such, this is one face that I previously painted turning into another face. And I really like that kind of one thing leads to another type process. I am a big fan of scanning my own artwork and reincorporating it in new ways. Sometimes I stay pretty true to the way that it originally was, and sometimes I alter them so much that you might not even be able to tell that they were the same in the first place. I would say the latter is kind of what ended up happening here. And at some point you'll see me pull out the original journal that this face was painted from and do a little bit of a side-by-side comparison. Now, because I didn't really have a direction when I started this cover, I wasn't very perfectionistic about the way I was painting the face. Sometimes if I know what I want to paint and I have kind of a plan for it, I can get extremely picky about the way that things look. However, because this was such an intuitive process, I just started using very broad strokes and tried to be as loose as I could. So I was working without any real direction even when I started the face. I also used kind of a medium-sized brush, one that was maybe a little bigger than I typically would use for something like this, because that type of brush forces you to be less perfectionistic because you can't get all of those fine details that you might want. Most of the work on this face was just done with some simple craft acrylic that you can get for 50 cents at Walmart and a water-soluble graphite pencil. With this particular face, I actually didn't even ink it. Sometimes I will go over my graphite lines with ink to make them more bold, but in this case I did like the way it looked with just the graphite. I think it was something about the simplicity and kind of subtleties of the background, so I just decided to go with that. When I was painting the hair, I also decided to add some paint splatters in the same color, just to kind of bring the rest of the figure that was primarily on the front of the journal more onto the back. And though I typically do my splatters in black, I do like the way it looked with the blue. Another thing I did is I used some gold spray to stencil some letters over most of the background of this cover. And this was much shinier before I blotted some of it up, but I do like the kind of grungy look that blotting it gave. The spray that I was using was the Heidi Swapp Color Shine in gold, and it is probably my favorite gold ink-ish spray thing that I've been able to find. One tip I do have about using this spray is to keep it lying on its side instead of straight up. And the reason for this is that if you leave it standing straight up, all of the pigment likes to settle to the bottom of the bottle, and it can be very, very difficult to shake it back up so that it's more evenly distributed without clogging up the nozzle. Whereas when you leave it on its side, the pigment settles to the side, and when you lift it, it isn't stuck to the bottom, and it's not stuck to the side either. So it just is a lot easier to kind of incorporate it. And pretty much the last thing that I did, or the last thing I want to talk about, I can't really remember where in the process of this video I did this, but the last thing that I haven't discussed is that I used some letters to spell out the word create across the front of the girl, and you'll be able to see me digging through an index card holder full of envelopes, and this is how I store my individual letters that I've cut out from newspapers and magazines and things like that. You could try to pick letters that are more similar to each other, but personally I like the effect of drastically different styles of text a lot more. And that is pretty much it for this mixed media journal cover. It's a pretty simple piece. There's not a whole lot to it. And although I typically do tend towards things that are a little bit more complex and layered, I do really like the way this turned out. So maybe I will just have to experiment with the simplicity more in the future. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for watching. You can subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And until next time, happy creating.